The Japanese judicial system has appeal processes. If this matter arises, you cannot appeal against the crime, and you will not be able to contest it in court if this matter arises. Does that mean the victim has no choice but to accept that they cannot legally punish the perpetrator? In this case, the perpetrator turned himself in after the statute of limitations had passed. Let's discuss a certain case. What meaning is there in a confession after the statute of limitations has passed? The Adachi Ward female teacher murder case, 19. On the evening of August 14, 1978, a female teacher working at an elementary school in Adachi Ward, Tokyo, went missing. Her family grew concerned when she didn't return on time. They received a call from the principal of the school saying that she was supposed to be at work, but she wasn't at school. The family filed a missing person report with the police. The police immediately began their investigation, but they couldn't find her, or even any clues that might lead to her. With no progress, 26 years passed until August 21, 2004, when someone came forward about the case. Surprisingly, this person had worked as a security guard at her elementary school. The man confessed that he was the one who killed her. Her body had been hidden under the floor of this person's house. In 2004, the statute of limitations was 15 years, so he turned himself in after it expired. The perpetrator buried the body until he moved in 2004. He lived in the house for 26 years, so what kind of feelings did he have during that time? Also, why did he decide to turn himself in after the incident? And this case is not a disappearance, but a murder. What did the bereaved family do after it was revealed? Here are the case details. About 40 years ago, on August 14, 1978, school was on summer vacation. However, the female teacher came to work for pool duty. As she walked down the hallway, she encountered the perpetrator, a security guard at the elementary school, and nearly bumped heads with him, and that led to an argument. Eventually, the security guard killed her by covering her mouth and suffocating her. The perpetrator hid the body in his car's trunk, wrapped in a blanket until his shift ended. He tied it up with a rope on top. Around that time, the principal noticed that she was missing. Even though she was supposed to be on duty, she hadn't shown up for work, so the principal called her family home. Worried, her family filed a missing person report. Meanwhile, the culprit took her body under the floor of the Japanese-style room at his house on the 15th, wrapped her further in a plastic sheet while his wife was away. It took him 4 hours to do it. He dug a hole with a shovel and buried her. On top of where he buried the body, he built a sunken kotatsu. That's right. From the beginning, the police investigated this case as a criminal incident because there was no reason for her to go missing. However, there was no sign or clue of her, and her family never received any news despite hoping she'd be found. And then, about 10 years after her disappearance in 1987, rumors began to circulate that this case might have involved abduction by North Korea. This started when a person who had been a North Korean agent mentioned that the teacher who taught their Japanese class resembled her. As a result, she was listed as a specified missing person, which refers to people whose disappearance cannot rule out the possibility of abduction by North Korea. Her name was added to the list. However, even so, nothing at all could be found about her. The case slowly faded from memory, and the murder statute of limitations expired. 15 years went by, and it became a thing of the past. Both the police and her family lost hope. It was in such a situation. But then, the case made unexpected progress. On August 21, 2004, 26 years after the incident, news reported the perpetrator turned himself in and confessed. At last, the case's full details would be revealed. Why did this occur? Why did the perpetrator turn himself in at this timing? It wasn't because of his parents' persuasion. The perpetrator knew about the statute of limitations and said he only turned himself in after it had expired, proving his awareness. Then, why did 15 years pass, and then another 11 years after that? Why did he talk after 26 years? The reason is that he had been hiding the body. His house was affected by land readjustment for road expansion, and the issue was discovered during demolition. That was the reason he gave. So, what kind of state of mind did the perpetrator live in from that situation until the statute of limitations expired? After the incident, the house where the body was buried was immediately surrounded by a fence. Barbed wire was installed. Searchlights and security cameras were also installed. The perpetrator completely stopped interacting with the neighbors, and people living nearby said that the shutters were always tightly closed. He would yell at anyone approaching the house with an iron rod in hand and always received deliveries outside the gate. These were just some of the rather strange behaviors that stood out. According to the perpetrator's statement, he also wanted to die. Of the case. According to the statement, he wanted to die. He wanted to die. He wanted to die. In this case, it wasn't that simple. To explain what that means, the culprit kept hiding the body. Does that act count as something done in the past? Or is it considered ongoing, in other words? As for the area where the body was found, the right to claim compensation might still be valid. As a result, in the first trial, the murder charge was not recognized. Regarding the area where the body was found, the act of continuously hiding the body was recognized as a separate illegal act from the murder. An order was issued to pay 3.3 million yen in body compensation. The bereaved family said, "This verdict suggests fleeing after an accident leads to forgiveness and offers no support for victims or their families." They called it unfair, left a comment, and said they'd appeal to the Tokyo High Court and keep fighting. And then an unexpected result awaited in the second trial. On January 31, 2008, the Tokyo High Court overturned the first trial's verdict and recognized the defendant's responsibility for the murder as well. A judgment of about 420 million yen was handed down, and the case was closed. This was regarding the criminal case. It was the first time that such a claim was recognized. But why? Was it because murder responsibility was also recognized in the second trial? That was linked to when the case was discovered. In other words, until the perpetrator turned himself in August 2004, it was not a fact that the victim had been murdered. Unaware of the abuse, the bereaved family prosecuted the murder case. It was determined that it would be extremely contrary to the principles of justice and fairness for the perpetrator to be exempt from liability for compensation, when the bereaved family, who do not even have rights, cannot exercise those rights. The perpetrator filed an appeal on April 28, 2009. However, the Supreme Court rejected it, finalizing the verdict. It was 5 years after the case was discovered, and actually 31 years after the murder. Also, in parallel with this trial, the perpetrator was hired as a security guard. Adachi Ward was also held responsible as an employer, and 200. In December 2007, the ward agreed to a settlement by paying 25 million yen in settlement money. However, unfortunately, by the time this verdict was handed down, both parents had already passed away. At a press conference, the remaining family members said they didn't think her pain and fear could be erased in 15 years. They commented on the criminal appeal, saying they want a conclusion that will satisfy the victim and society. The statute of limitations exists because evidence and materials are lost over time, making investigations harder. In this case, the perpetrator's house, where the body was concealed, was set to be demolished, which led to the perpetrator turning themselves in. In other words, if there had been no demolition, they might not have surrendered. The perpetrator probably wouldn't have turned themselves in. If the murder wasn't discovered, the perpetrator wouldn't be liable for compensation. The victim's family might have kept searching for their loved one. That future was also possible. In Japan, nearly 80,000 people go missing every year. Among them, there might be cases like this that are hidden. It's possible. As of 2021, there is no longer a statute of limitations for murder cases. In a country ruled by law, we rely on the judiciary to judge criminals. There is no alternative. I can only hope that the ongoing legal reforms will continue to move in a positive direction in the future. Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. The Kyoto case of the murder of a 19-year-old woman. In October 2016, Ms. K, a 19-year-old woman living in ID Town, Kyoto Prefecture, went missing. Her family filed a missing person report with the Kyoto Prefectural Police, and her friends and then boyfriend gathered information through social media and other means. But time just kept passing without any promising leads. And then, more than 5 years later, on February 16, 2022, finally, a certain individual was arrested on suspicion of killing her and abandoning her body. That individual was her boyfriend at the time. After that, during a voluntary interview, he admitted to killing and abandoning her, saying that they often fought. He said that the stress from that built up and that he killed her impulsively, explaining his motive for the crime. The person arrested was a 25-year-old company employee, Sei Suemi. The missing person, Ms. K, and Suemi. The suspect and victim attended the same school from elementary to high school. They were childhood friends and started dating in their 3rd year of high school. But he was concerned about Ms. K's friendships with male friends. It seems there were things he didn't like, and he would often say things that made it sound like he suspected her of cheating. They fought frequently, breaking up and getting back together repeatedly. Despite being that kind of couple, his madness finally crossed the line. October 22, 2016. On this day, the two of them were fighting as usual in a car parked near their home. There are various pieces of information about the cause of the argument on social media and summary sites, but the exact reason is still unknown at this time. However, people around them witnessed the argument. And after this sighting, Mr. K's location became unknown. 3 days later, his family reported him missing to the Kyoto Prefectural Police. Of course, the family also asked her boyfriend if he knew anything about her whereabouts. However, he said that on that day, he walked her home and saw her go inside. The family believed his words. K's younger sister and friends asked for information on social media. He himself also said, "I have to take action myself, right?" That's right. And then, after that, he took a certain action. This became clear through the testimony of an acquaintance. After Mr. K went missing, a few days later he contacted this acquaintance and said he was in Nara Prefecture. Near Mount Wakakusa, Mr. K's smartphone was turned on. He was told that they could find his location using the phone's information. He was asked to go to Mount Wakakusa together. At that time, he said he hadn't slept much. He asked an acquaintance to drive, and they headed to Mount Wakakusa that evening. In the mountains, they looked around from the road, but couldn't find any clues that would lead to Mr. K. After that, his acquaintance suggested that he get out of the car and search. However, he got out of the car, but he didn't do so. After about 10 minutes had passed and it seemed pointless, he said they should go home, and that day, when he went to her place, she let him in. She was a woman. On the 15th, they questioned him about his circumstances, and he eventually admitted to killing Ms. K. He confessed to strangling her with both hands while she was in the passenger seat. They often argued before, and he was under a lot of stress, so he killed her impulsively. Afterwards, he drove to Mount Wakakusa in Nara Prefecture and threw the body along with her belongings from the road into the mountain. He was arrested for suspected murder on the 16th and later sent to the prosecutor's office. The police arrested him based on this statement. In the 21 days after the arrest, 790 police officers searched the mountains and forests. In addition to Kei-san's belongings, some skeletal human remains were found, and subsequent DNA analysis identified the discovered bones as belonging to Kei-san. During an interview, Kei-san's younger sister addressed Tsuyomi, the suspect. She just asked, "Why?" and deeply regretted it, saying she wished her older sister could get her time back. And then, on March 8, 2022, he was indicted for murder. The trial is scheduled to take place in the future, but as of May 2022, it has not yet been held. And it seems the truth about this case will take time to come to light. From here on, I will address some of the questions regarding this case. First, let's talk about why he wasn't arrested for as long as 5 years and 4 months. He was Ms. K's boyfriend and the person who was arguing with her right before she went missing. Even if you're not an investigator, you'd likely think he knew something about what happened. But reports say it wasn't until February 2022, over 5 years after she disappeared, that finally, just recently, a suspicion arose that the suspect might know something about the case, and when questioned voluntarily, he admitted to the killing. In other words, was there never a time when he came up as a suspect during the investigation? I don't think that's the case, but even the police's investigation methods at the time are being questioned. The police's investigation, the police's skewer. The police's skewer. Acting like the police, acting like the police, acting like the police's police, acting like the police's skewer, acting like the police's skewer. And when I tried to put my hands around his neck, it wasn't a very quick move. Mr. Kagiri might escape through the opposite door or step on the horn to make a sound. This raised the question of whether he could have done things like that to call for help from people around him. According to reports on this case, he stopped near his home. It was witnessed by people around that they were fighting inside the car. He stated that after killing her in the car, he drove to Mount Wakakusa. Because of these 2 points, the killing itself took place in a public area, so it wouldn't be surprising if someone witnessed the moment depending on the circumstances. Did the perpetrator really commit the crime under those circumstances? If so, there should have been bodily fluids or other evidence on the car seat. That's possible. They also drove to Mount Wakakusa in Nara Prefecture with the body still in the car. That's about 18 minutes in distance, so they traveled for 50 to 60 minutes. Was there really not a single trace left on the seats or inside the car? Or even if they did find traces that she had been there, was it because they had a fight that he wasn't suspected? Was it because there weren't any marks or wounds on his hands or arms that would have been caused by resistance? So, up to this point, I've been thinking based on the information from newspapers and his statements at the time. However, the fact remains that there were no eyewitnesses at the time of the crime, and although the police were investigating at the time, they couldn't find any traces in his car, so he wasn't arrested. Based on this assumption, one particular hypothesis can be made. That is, the crime scene was not in a public area, but rather became the site of the incident. It suggests he went to Wakakusa Mountain and committed the murder there. If this is close to the truth, then a very important point in this case will be overturned. That means it can be said that he did not kill impulsively, but rather committed the murder with a certain degree of planning. In other words, this will have a significant impact on the judgment in the upcoming trial. And what I found most puzzling as I learned about this case was why. The question is why he and his friend went to Wakakusa Mountain just days after the murder. In the evening, he lied to an acquaintance and went to Wakakusa Mountain together. That acquaintance now says he might have been checking if the body's location was visible from the surroundings. If so, isn't it odd they went to Wakakusa Mountain in the evening when it was already dark and visibility was poor? Moreover, since they finished in about 10 minutes, I can't figure out what their aim was. Were they just curious about what happened next? Or was there another reason? Bringing someone to Wakakusa Mountain at that specific time, did he have to leave for a reason? He mentioned constant arguments during the interrogation. He stated that he committed the crime impulsively due to stress. But I don't think any trivial reason justifies taking a life. When he was arrested, the 3-year statute of limitations had already passed for the charge of abandoning a corpse. He was only charged with murder, but even if the statute of limitations had expired, the seriousness and cruelty of his crime would not change one bit. What will he say in the upcoming trial? I sincerely pray for the repose of Mr. K's soul, and I hope that the day will come as soon as possible when the wounds in the hearts of his family and friends will begin to heal, even if just a little. That's all for this time. Thank you for watching. How do you relieve stress when you feel it? Maybe you hang out with friends, go shopping, or sing your heart out at karaoke. Some people immerse themselves in their hobbies. Everyone has their own way of dealing with stress. If your way of relieving stress doesn't bother others, there's usually no problem. But the truth is, there are some people who relieve stress or even feel pleasure by causing trouble for others. And this tendency tends to be even stronger in so-called serious or earnest people. So this time, I'd like to talk about a deeply disturbing case caused by a man who appeared to be serious on the surface. The Osaka Kita Ward hotel room female murder case. On January 16, 1994, around 6 p.m., the body of a 26-year-old woman was found in a hotel room in Umeda, Kita Ward, Osaka. This woman was an office worker who worked at a dating club. She was beaten multiple times on the head and face, then strangled to death. On this day, the woman was sent from the dating club to a date location. The person who requested the woman was staying in this room. The man was gone. The woman's bag was missing, and only the body remained at the scene. A bodily fluid thought to be the perpetrator's was left behind. The police investigation began immediately, and something believed to belong to the perpetrator was left in the room. The bodily fluid was subjected to DNA testing, but unfortunately, at the time, there was no data matching the DNA test results, so the perpetrator could not be identified. 13 years after the incident, in December 2007, just 1 year remained before the statute of limitations expired. There was only about 1 year left until the statute of limitations for this case. One person was rearrested on suspicion of murder in this case. Kazuo Oshiya, the suspect, was 48 at the time. Who is this person, and how did the suspect come to be arrested? Now, let's review the case details and its background. Around 2:10 p.m. on January 16, 1994, in Kita Ward, Osaka City, a man who looked like a businessman checked into the hotel for a one-night, two-day stay. Then, the man called a dating club and asked for a date to be arranged for him. Then, around 5:20 p.m., the woman arrived at the room. Then, at noon, the next day, the 17th, when the man still hadn't come to check out by then, an employee went to check the room. He was found in a completely changed state. They found the woman, and there was blood splattered around her, with a pool of blood on the floor. Her condition made it clear it was too late. The hotel staff contacted police, who arrived quickly. The room was in a terrible state. There were also signs that the woman's face and head had been struck multiple times with something like a blunt object. This case was determined to be suspicious, and an investigation was immediately launched as a murder case. According to the subsequent autopsy, the estimated time of the woman's death was when the man checked in, around 6 o'clock p.m. that day. In other words, she was killed within about 40 minutes after she arrived at 5:20 p.m. And then, about 20 minutes later, the man had blood on his body and clothes. He covered the bloodstains with his coat, struck the woman, and left the hotel with the blunt object. That's what happened. This was revealed from the security camera footage. The results of DNA testing on bodily fluids believed to belong to the suspect left in the room, and the detailed actions of the man before and after the crime. Based on these factors, it was believed that the suspect would be apprehended quickly. However, contrary to those expectations, the investigation did not progress any further. There was no progress, and the investigation became extremely difficult. As time passed, the case itself gradually faded from memory. However, as mentioned earlier, about 13 years later, on December 2, 2007, this case suddenly made progress. The trigger for this was a malicious prank by a certain man. He would later be arrested. Oshiya, the suspect, trespassed into private yards in the neighborhood over 100 times. He committed nuisance acts, such as scattering women's underwear he had worn himself in places like those. This act violated the waste management law. He and several pieces of evidence were secured, and the following items were seized at that time: women's underwear, and astonishingly, what was attached to it, AKA's DNA type, and what was left in the hotel room from the incident 13 years ago. The DNA from the fluid is a perfect match. The case will be closed. This case is about to reach a turning point. This case is about to suddenly make progress. He is not involved in this case at all. The target is him, following the criminal. The footage from the security camera at the time showed a man whose appearance closely resembled that of the suspect. The suspect denied involvement in this case, but regarding the violation of the waste disposal law, he said, "I enjoyed thinking that my discarded underwear would bother the neighbors." He said he wore women's underwear and threw it away at houses to relieve stress. He said he resented society and wondered why only he faced such hardship. Regarding this case, no confession has been obtained from Oshishita, the suspect. A major piece of evidence is the DNA match. Based on this, the prosecution on January 15, 2008, they decided to indict the suspect for murder and rape, resulting in death. But about half a year later, this case reached an even more shocking conclusion. On September 20, 2008, he was found dead in his solitary cell at the Osaka detention center. He attempted to hang himself using a shirt and a towel and died on the 27th. This case came to a close due to the defendant's death. Kazuo Oshitani worked as an accountant at a major department store in Osaka. He looked like an ordinary intellectual office worker. He got married and was blessed with 3 children. But in 1995, his wife died from illness. From then on, he was a single father, working hard to raise his children, handle housework, and manage his job alone. Each morning, he woke up before 5 a.m., made breakfast, and packed his kids' lunches before work. He was known in the neighborhood as a friendly and serious father, but that was the so-called public face he showed. On the other hand, after his wife's death, he began to engage in behaviors such as scattering worn women's underwear. At one point, he was actually caught and restrained when he tried to sneak into a private home dressed in women's clothing. He struggled to explain, saying he didn't know what to do with his wife's underwear. People may have pitied him for raising his child alone, so he only got a strict warning, even after this incident. He didn't stop his abnormal behavior, and in the end, these actions became the trigger that exposed everything to the public. Furthermore, after that, it was also revealed that he had embezzled about 200 million yen from his workplace. He avoided criminal charges by repaying the full amount. The reason he started writing was because of the sense of loss from losing his wife and how her death completely changed his life. It's believed that stress played a major role. But is that really true? His wife died in 1995, and he killed a woman in a hotel in 1994 before his wife passed away. He committed murder a year earlier. The motive for killing the woman. Since his passing, little has been mentioned, but he brought several weapons into the hotel and killed her soon after she entered the room. He stole a bag of valuables and fled. He stole a bag containing valuables and ran away. He's a serious single father, but actually embezzled 200 million yen and threw underwear into private homes. He repeatedly engaged in such behavior, and in the end, even committed murder. It was rumored in the neighborhood. His hidden side was nothing like the image of a wonderful father. That's something everyone has to some extent. It could be a secret fetish you can't tell anyone about, or smiling on the outside while cursing someone in your heart. But you could also say that by letting out that hidden side, people are able to keep their mental balance. When that balance is severely disrupted and you lose self-control, that's when you end up like the defendant here. So, everyone, be careful not to trust people too much just by looking at their outward appearance. Please be careful and always keep a certain level of skepticism toward everyone. Yes, that applies to me as well. Lastly, regarding the person who lost their life in this case, I sincerely pray for the woman's soul to rest in peace. Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you very much for watching. On November 20th, 2020, a man was arrested on this day. The man was 200. He is suspected of the 2005 Hyogo Prefecture, abduction, and robbery, and was on the national wanted list. And yet, he was on the run for 15 years. In fact, the day this person was arrested was, believe it or not, just 20 days before the statute of limitations would have expired. It was an arrest made right before the statute of limitations ran out, and it was widely covered by the media. Something about the events before the arrest in this case wasn't reported by the media. A statute of limitations rule allowed the suspect to be arrested in this case. Without that, this arrest would not have happened. The Hyogo Prefecture, Takarazuka City abduction and robbery case. Around 9 p.m. on March 27, 2005 at a city road intersection in Akura Minami, Takarazuka City, Hyogo Prefecture, a car rear-ended a passenger car driven by a 43-year-old used car dealer. When the man exited his car, two men jumped out of the other car and without hesitation pulled out knives and stabbed him in the chest. At the same time as the man felt pain, the two men forced him into the back seat of the passenger car he had been driving. The perpetrators abandoned their car, took the other car, and threatened to kill him if he resisted, following their organization's orders. They threatened him, saying, "We're doing this for a 50 million yen reward," and drove him around for about 3.5 hours. They arrived at his house, where he was blindfolded with a necktie and his hands bound with duct tape. The perpetrators acted quickly, stealing money and valuables from the bedroom safe. They used his car again to escape. After the perpetrators left, he removed his blindfold and sought help from neighbors, leading to the incident's discovery. The victim lost about 45.5 million yen in cash and 10.5 million yen in valuables, including his car. Sei's injuries weren't life-threatening and would heal in about a week. Police started investigating right after the report. Police first noticed that the perpetrators went to his house without asking for his address. In other words, the perpetrators already knew where his house was. From this, it was clear that it wasn't a random crime. He had been targeted from the very beginning. We proceeded with the investigation, considering it a premeditated crime. However, there was no information or clues leading to the perpetrator. But later, some concerning incidents related to this case continued to occur. Molotov cocktails were thrown into the used car dealership he managed, and graffiti was sprayed on its walls, for example. These incidents kept happening. Details are still unknown, but they may be linked to the main case. I believe these were acts of intimidation. About a year after the main incident, on March 7, 2006. Up to this point, we've discussed how there have been no leads. Thanks to the police's steady investigation, after a year, there was finally progress. That means the resolution of the case. In other words, the arrest of the culprits. The person arrested was Tamba City's carpenter, who played the role of the perpetrator, a 37-year-old man and a 44-year-old restaurant worker from Nishinomiya City who helped him. People were arrested. From their statements, it was revealed that there were other individuals involved in this case. The suspect, Tatsuya Okada, was an accomplice and served as another perpetrator. No evidence suggests an organization was involved. Only the two arrested individuals and Okada, a total of 3, carried it out. They confessed that it was a crime. It is also clear that this case was planned in advance. In fact, this accomplice, who works at a restaurant, knew the victim's address and that he kept cash at home. He investigated these things and told the remaining 2 people. One of the perpetrators was arrested, but the accomplice, Okada, was still on the run. The Hyogo Prefectural Police put Okada on the nationwide wanted list, but couldn't find him, and time passed in vain. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. The investigation stalled as the 15-year statute of limitations for robbery with injury neared. And then, in 2020, 15 years had passed since the incident occurred. However, the police investigation continued. And as mentioned at the beginning, in November 2020, that is, more than 15 years have passed since the incident occurred. Okada was dramatically arrested just 20 days before the statute of limitations expired. Of course, I think you're wondering why. In this case, why hadn't the statute of limitations expired even after 15 years had passed since the incident? That's because there is a certain rule regarding the statute of limitations. In 1998, In 1998, in 1998, in 1998, in 1919, in 1998, in 1998, in 1919, 98, in 1998, in 19, in 1998, in 19, in 1998, in 19. On November 20th, 2020, police got a tip that Okada was in Osaka City. They interviewed people, reviewed security footage, and pursued reports of his sightings. This led them to his hideout, where they arrested him. He did it because he wanted money. Okada admitted to the crime during questioning. Okada was 60 years old at the time of his arrest. He was taken into custody in Nishinari Ward, Osaka City. Okada, who had been on the run for many years, what was going through his mind when he was finally confronted with the incident? During the 15 years he was on the run, was he constantly living in fear of being caught? Perhaps. However, Okada's fear of arrest made him stab, blindfold, and drag someone. I firmly state that his fear doesn't even come close to what the victim experienced. The man who committed the crime was arrested, served his sentence, and is now back in society. I hope Okada also acknowledges the pain of the victim and properly atones for his crime. Fortunately, in this case, the male victim only suffered minor injuries. However, cases where victims lose their lives in robbery incidents are by no means rare. Sometimes lives are lost over just a few thousand yen. We must realize that news incidents aren't just others' problems. I hope everyone, myself included, stays aware of crime prevention and can live safely. Well then, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. At about 10 p.m. on May 1, 2009, a young man broke into a house in Kanie-honmachi, Kanie City, Aichi Prefecture. The perpetrator was a burglar looking for valuables, and the lights were off. He entered the Japanese-style room on the first floor and searched for anything valuable. Mr. Y, age 57, and living in the house, appeared and called out to the intruder, "Who are you?" The panicked intruder tried to flee in a hurry, but Mr. Y grabbed the intruder's clothes and wouldn't let go. The intruder, thrown off by Mr. Y's actions, grabbed the monkey wrench he held and struck Mr. Y on the head. However, during this, Mr. Y's son, Mr. B, who was 26 years old at the time, came home. Mr. B found his mother being attacked and jumped at the intruder to save her. However, the intruder fought back, and the two struggled violently for about an hour. In the end, the intruder tied up Mr. B's hands with an electric cord, and during this struggle the mask the intruder was wearing came off, and Mr. B saw the intruder's face directly. Realizing this, the intruder, fearing being caught by the police, decided to kill Mr. B. Then, grabbing a knife from the kitchen, he stabbed Mr. B in the back several times. Mr. Y and Mr. B died soon after. The perpetrator tried to remove evidence by cleaning up the blood, footprints, and washing the clothes. About 4 hours after the crime, at 2:25 a.m. the next day, on the 2nd, while the perpetrator was trying to erase the evidence, Ms. I, who is Y's daughter, returned home in the middle of the night. The perpetrator noticed the sound, and as Ms. I was taking off her shoes at the entrance, suddenly attacked her from behind with a knife, stabbing her several times in the neck. Although Ms. I was suddenly stabbed in the neck, she desperately fought back and struggled with the perpetrator, but then calmly tried to persuade him. The perpetrator wore a mask, so Ms. I couldn't see his face. As a result, he listened to her and didn't commit more crimes. The perpetrator put a hoodie over Ms. I's head, blindfolded her with adhesive tape, and tied her wrists with rope so she couldn't move. Still, Ms. I told the perpetrator to leave without taking further action. However, the perpetrator claimed there was more to do and remained seated in Ms. Y's house. The perpetrator then destroyed evidence, searched for valuables, and took about 200,000 yen in cash from Ms. Y's home. He also stole a watch and sneakers. Hours after Ms. I returned home, the sun was rising. However, the perpetrator never left Ms. Y's house, and a female acquaintance visited her. Even at that time, the perpetrator was still sitting in the house, however. There was no response, so Ms. Y's female acquaintance left. That afternoon, she didn't come to the office and couldn't be reached. B-san's supervisor, worried about B-san, visited Y-san's house with a police officer. Then, realizing this, Mr. I, though barely conscious, checked if the culprit was nearby, ran out, and was taken into police protection. And actually, at that time, the culprit was crouching at the entrance. However, the police officer mistakenly thought the culprit was the victim, and while he was calling for backup over the radio, the culprit took advantage of the opportunity and escaped. After that, when the police entered Mr. Y's house, they found Mr. B in the first-floor Japanese-style room with a stab wound in his back. He was taken to the hospital, but was soon pronounced dead. Police quickly ruled it a murder, set up a special investigation team, and started tracking the suspect. On the following day, May 3rd, the police visited Mr. Y's house again for a new investigation. As they continued their inspection, they discovered Mr. Y's body in the closet. Furthermore, the police found blood-stained clothing in the washing machine at Mr. Y's house. Inside the room, they found a hoodie and the crime weapon. Besides a monkey wrench and craft knife, items like gloves and masks were also found. And from those items, what is thought to be the perpetrator's DNA was found and compared with the National Police Agency's database by the Special Investigation Team. However, unfortunately, it did not lead to identifying the perpetrator. Also, the body of the cat that was kept at Mr. Y's house was found at the scene. And this is also believed to be the work of the perpetrator in this case. With all this evidence, why was the perpetrator not arrested quickly? The reason lies with the police. It has been pointed out that there were many mistakes in the initial investigation. These are considered to be the initial investigation mistakes. 1. Mr. 1Y was found a day after his discovery was delayed. 2. When Mr. B's supervisor and a police officer visited Mr. Y's house, the perpetrator was present but allowed to escape. 3. They also did not disclose this incident. At first, the police investigated the case, assuming the perpetrator was someone familiar. However, partway through, they changed to investigating it as a crime committed by a stranger. 5. They changed their view on the crime on the 3rd, a day after the incident. The on-site investigation reported no shoe prints found. However, later on, shoe prints were found all over Mr. Y's house, which are believed to be items left behind by the perpetrator. The jacket's public release was delayed 2 weeks due to similar mistakes. About 6 months after the incident, on December 9th, the National Police Agency made the case eligible for a special investigation reward. As a result, for this case, a reward of up to 3 million yen will be paid for valuable information. No useful information leading to the suspect was found, and 3 years passed. It seemed like this case would remain unsolved. But on December 7, 2012, there was a major turning point. That was when someone was arrested and charged with stealing a male office worker's car in Sioux City, Mai Prefecture. Lin Jinhua, a 29-year-old Chinese male suspect, had DNA matching that of the perpetrator in this case. In response, Aichi, the prefectural police, immediately began questioning Lin. Then, Lin quickly, he confessed to being involved in this case. The Aichi Prefectural Police then arrested Lin on suspicion of robbery and murder, as well as attempted robbery and murder. After that, Lin attempted suicide and repeatedly engaged in self-harm while in the detention center, so a psychiatric evaluation was conducted. The results showed he had no issues with criminal responsibility or standing trial, so the first trial began. On February 20th, 2015, the day of the first trial's verdict, Lin was sentenced to death. Dissatisfied with this, he appealed to the Nagoya High Court. On October 14, 2015, the appeal was dismissed and the initial verdict upheld. That same year, the victim's family used the compensation order system to file a damages claim against Lin. They sought about 179 million yen in damages, including lost earnings and medical expenses for both victims. And on March 24, 2016, the Nagoya District Court ordered Lin to pay about 56 million yen in compensation. The defense opposed the death penalty up to the Supreme Court, but their appeal was denied. On September 6, 2018, the Supreme Court ruled the crime showed strong intent to kill and extreme cruelty, declaring the defendant extremely responsible. The court upheld the death sentences from previous trials. AI, the only surviving victim and third son, spoke about the incident during the trial. He said he regretted going out drinking that day, as no one would have been hurt otherwise. The death row inmate was born and raised in China, and lived a life without any hardships. He had excellent grades. At his father's suggestion, he came to Japan as an international student to study advanced technology, but he was always struggling financially. Around this time, he got involved in crime and was arrested twice for shoplifting. And after that, he would go on to commit this incident, but surprisingly, even after committing it, he stayed in Japan. After graduating, he moved to Mie Prefecture. He worked at an auto parts manufacturer, and he even started thinking about getting married. When he asked for a raise at the company, things didn't work out, and he resigned. He then stayed in Japan and changed jobs. In 2012, he was arrested again for theft due to financial difficulties, and then his involvement in this case became clear. Regarding what triggered this incident, he later spoke about it like this. He saw a cat enter the house through the front door, and decided that the front door of this house was not locked. As of 2022, the death row inmate is still incarcerated. This case is by no means someone else's problem. It was a crime that targeted the gaps in our everyday lives. In other words, it could happen to anyone. Lastly, I would like to offer my heartfelt condolences to those who were affected by this case. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. In elementary school, a stranger threatened me with a knife and abducted me. Can you imagine being deprived of your freedom for as long as 9 years? Given little food, just crouching and enduring a life of violence and fear. Just because the girl was cute, he kidnapped and confined her for that reason alone. We're going to cover the worst case. Niigata girl confinement incident, January 28, 2000, Kashiwazaki, Niigata Prefecture. It was discovered that a girl had been confined in a private house in Yotsuya. In fact, this girl was 19. She had gone missing in Sanjo City, Niigata Prefecture in 1990. She was revealed to be A-chan, a 4th grade student. The perpetrator was near Hakenji. Noriyuki Sato, then 37, held her for 9 years and 2 months. Nothing compares to it. It was a long-term confinement case, coinciding with a scandal involving the Niigata Prefectural Police. Several books were also published about the case, which caused a huge public reaction. On November 13, 1990, A-chan disappeared in Sanjo City, Niigata Prefecture. At 7 p.m., A-chan's parents filed a missing person report right away. Over 100 people, including police and school officials, searched but did not find A-chan. On the 14th, the search grew to 200 people. On the 15th, the mobile investigation unit joined. They also searched empty houses and containers. However, these searches yielded no clues, and the possibility of an abduction was considered. Searchu. They began the search. They started searching. They began the search. The search is tough. It's clear on the left, and it's clear on the right. On January 19th, public health staff tried to visit Takusato but didn't meet him. His mother requested a doctor's house call, which ultimately led to the incident's discovery. On January 28th, doctors found Takusato on the 2nd floor. After 9 years and 2 months, they found Ms. A and took her into protective custody. Based on her testimony, it was revealed that Sato abducted her by forcing her into his car's trunk after school, along with details about her captivity. I couldn't go outside, so I was forcibly taken away. I was so scared I couldn't escape. I was taken by the doctors. When she went outside, she muttered quietly, "That's right." After being confined for so long, her legs grew so weak she couldn't walk unassisted. Her life during confinement, later revealed, was unimaginable. Here are the case details. On November 13, 1990, Sato threatened her with a knife as she walked home from school, forced her into his car trunk, and drove her to his house. After bringing her to his house, he assaulted her repeatedly and told her, "You can't escape. Do as I say." He pressed a knife to her abdomen and threatened, "Should I stab you, I'll bury you in the mountains." For a girl who was only 9 years old, being threatened with violence by an adult man must have been nothing but terrifying. After that, Sato completely took away her freedom by tying her up to prevent her from escaping while he was out. In addition, Sato pressed a stun gun against her and discharged it to instill fear in her. If she made any noise, she would be punished, and this happened daily. She reportedly bit her arm to cope with the pain. She was forced to stay in bed at all times and punished if she disobeyed. Without a toilet or bath, she had to use a plastic bag instead. Amazingly, in 9 years, she was allowed to take a bath only once, and that was because she accidentally fell off the bed and got covered in dust. Because of this, she could only use the shower, and this went on for 9 years. Her leg muscles wasted away, and her bones weakened, making it difficult for her to even walk. As for meals, at first, Sato's mother gave her homemade dinners. Eventually, she received convenience store rice balls only twice a day. Then by 1996, just once daily. That had a major impact. Her lack of education for 9 years was also highlighted as a major issue, but in her case, there was no decline in intelligence, and her knowledge and vocabulary were on par with others her age. However, the most serious impact was seen in her communication with others. She has trouble meeting with large groups of people and can't talk to people she's meeting for the first time, and she's afraid of the opposite sex. 9 years of captivity left her with serious after effects. Sato replied, "Those were the good old days." Instead of reflecting on his crime or his wish to be with her forever, he just complained about being caught. What existed between Sato and her was a one-sided and twisted emotion, dominated by daily violence and fear. On February 10th, the month after she was rescued, it was revealed that Sato had a criminal record. A year earlier in this prefecture, Sato was arrested in Kashiwazaki City for trying to assault a 4th-grade girl on her way home from school. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison with a 3-year suspended sentence. But surprisingly, this information was not recorded. In other words, he wasn't even registered on the criminal list. He wasn't on the criminal list that was referenced during the search for A-chan. If Sato's criminal record had been registered on that list, when A-chan went missing, the location, and the crime, it's believed that based on the method, Sato would definitely have emerged as an important person of interest. And then, on July 10, 2003, the Supreme Court sentenced Sato to 14 years closing the case. After that, Sato was released from prison around 2015. He stayed in Chiba Prefecture, living alone in an apartment, instead of returning to Niigata Prefecture. But in 2017, Sato was found collapsed in his room, and after an autopsy, it was confirmed he died of natural causes in his mid-50s. The exact illness is unknown, but no foul play was involved. While Sato was serving his sentence, the mother he lived with passed away. That's right. What kind of person was the criminal Nobuyuki Sato, who stole the precious time of a young girl? Sato was born on July 15, 1962. His parents, who called him Boku-chan, spoiled him and raised him overprotectively. They continued using the nickname even after he grew up. That's right. He was only satisfied if things went exactly his way. The root of this case lies in how Sato was raised like this, and he began to resort to violence when things didn't go his way. To go back a bit, Sato started to become isolated in his class after he entered technical high school. He started skipping school frequently and began taking out his frustrations at home. After graduating from high school, he got a job at an auto parts manufacturing company. But he quit after just a few months. He never found another job after that. After that, he even kicked out his estranged father from the house. Anyway, he lived his life so that everything would go his way. Nitori. He talked little, spoke little, and was generally quiet. Purchase a stun gun at AR-Vert Convert Home Center. My son would say things like that to me, but I kept going until the girl was found. For more than 20 years, I never entered Sato's room. That was because I was afraid of Sato's violence. The most notable example is this. My mother started spending her time at a place where she could stay from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day for 500 yen. That's right, however. In December 1,999, my mother finally reached her limit and consulted a psychiatric hospital in the city about Sato. My son's violence is severe. If things don't go his way, he hits and kicks me. On top of that, he even ties me up and won't even let me go to the bathroom. It sounds like a serious situation, but the hospital told her to bring her son in. There's no way a mother who is afraid of her son could possibly take him to the hospital herself. After that, when she consulted the public health center, 7 staff members from the center visited the Sato residence. And that's when the incident was discovered. They didn't realize that someone was being confined on the 2nd floor of the house. The main reason was the fear that the mother felt towards Sato, not getting involved with him at all, not knowing what he was doing even under the same roof. That was exactly why it took about 9 years after she was confined before she was discovered. At that time, a series of scandals involving the Niigata Prefectural Police were exposed one after another. As I mentioned earlier, they registered Sato on the criminal list, and then forgot about it. And there were also problems with the announcement made after this case was discovered. It would take too long to go into details, so I'll keep it brief this time, but Sato committed this case. Previously, the Public Health Center repeatedly asked the police to act on Sato, but they did nothing. And at the press conference, they explained that there were no problems with the police's actions, as if trying to hide that fact. At the time of the incident, the prefectural police chief was gambling on illegal mahjong and ignored the report. This fact also led to the resignation of the prefectural police chief. Furthermore, he was involved in making false statements. 9 people were disciplined after being linked to early investigation errors. 5 more people were disciplined, and 3 senior officials involved in illegal mahjong gambling also faced punishment. The Niigata prefectural police scandal was discussed in the national diet. And then, another problem occurred in our prefecture, this time involving the media. Ms. A, placed in protective custody, was deeply hurt, and constant media coverage only worsened her emotional pain. Why? Did she not run away? Do people really believe that a child, dominated by fear and violence from an adult man, could escape on her own? This incident made me realize just how precious, ordinary, everyday life truly is. It can happen suddenly, even in daily life. Peace, which can be lost in an instant, in just a few seconds, is not something we should take for granted. We never know when or who might be involved in an incident. I think it would be great if everyone could take actions to protect themselves and those close to them. I just hope Mr. A, who was harmed in our prefecture, is as happy as possible. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. August 2011. Summer vacation, with children often playing in the park. Metal cans emitting a strange odor were found in parks and on streets in Tennoji Ward, Osaka City, according to the person who first found them. Inside them were dismembered bodies. Who put the metal cans there and why? The case became a midsummer mystery. But the prefectural police investigation ended suddenly, leaving many mysteries, including the metal can case, unsolved after 20 years. On August 14th, 2011 cleaning took place at a park in Tennoji Ward, Osaka City. A male volunteer noticed a foul smell. He discovered a metal can emitting the odor. The can had been placed leaning against some shrubbery. The lid was taped with vinyl, resembling a standard waste oil can. When the man opened the lid, to his shock, he found a human ankle and head inside. Later that afternoon, about 100 meters from the park on a nearby street, a pair of wrists and several bone fragments were found. 2 metal cans held those items. And then, the next day, a third metal can containing a left ankle was found at a nearby garbage dump. There were 2 dismembered bodies in total, and DNA testing was conducted on them. As a result, they were identified. It was found that the 2 were mother and child. Further investigation showed the 2 had been reported missing in 2006, 5 years earlier. It was discovered that they were a mother, who was 46 years old at the time, and her eldest son, who was 21 years old, both from the same city. And as a result of the police investigation, 9 days after the first metal can was discovered, on the 20th, on August 23, 2011, the mother's husband and the eldest son's father, Yasutaka Fujimori, 57, was arrested for allegedly abandoning a body. He found the metal can. He lived near the scene and was found there too. On one of the 3 metal cans, the name of a special chemical was written. It was discovered that he worked at the pharmaceutical company that was the recipient of this raw chemical. He told investigators, "I threw away the metal cans, I remember. My wife left me." He denied the allegation, claiming he didn't know her whereabouts or actions after that. 3 months later, on November 24th, he was indicted for their murders. Then, on October 15, 2013, the Supreme Court found him guilty of murder and bodily injury resulting in death, sentencing him to 28 years in prison, which became final. He dismembered his family and left their bodies in parks and streets, shocking Japan. What happened between this father and his family? And why, after 5 years, was it still expected they could be found at any time? Was it because he moved the bodies to obvious spots over time? I want to follow the case to find the truth behind these events. In 2003, 3 years before the missing persons report, Fujimori made excuses such as visiting pachinko parlors. He borrowed money from consumer finance companies, and the amount quickly ballooned. To repay it, he canceled an insurance policy without his wife's knowledge. He used that money to temporarily pay off his debts, and borrowed more money. After 3 years, the amount was about 2 million yen, and by April of the 6th year, it reached around 4 million yen. At that time, his wife suggested canceling their insurance to pay for their eldest son's tuition, but it was discovered that he had already canceled it without her permission. Because of that, their eldest son was expelled from the university he was attending at the time due to unpaid tuition. These financial troubles with his wife and their other child. The second son also testified that their parents often argued about money, and during their fights, the eldest son would side with their mother and oppose him. It is believed that this was the cause that led to the incident. The details are unknown. Fujimori killed his wife and eldest son, dismembering their bodies at their Osaka city home and at his workplace. He took them to the pharmaceutical company, and then at the company, to hide the bodies in the company dormitory, he used an electric saw to cut them into smaller pieces. He cut the bodies into 4 pieces, packed them in boxes, and stored them in the company dorm. And after that, his wife and eldest son disappeared in April. He filed a missing persons report with local police, saying he didn't know the cause or motive. And then, he left the bodies packed in a container at the company. Just like that. For 3 whole years during this time, no one found the bodies. The person who found the case reported a container with a strange smell. Why? Was he able to keep the container hidden inside the company? The reason for that was his position and job. He belonged to the product management department of this company, and since around 2001 he had served as the department manager. As part of his duties, he was on the premises. He was also responsible for managing the disposal site of the metropolitan government and handling the disposal of unnecessary items from the metropolitan government. He took advantage of this and managed it himself. He considered placing the metropolitan government container with the body in the product storage warehouse, which was kept at 27 degrees. He added other products to the containers. In that condition, was there really no one entering or leaving the product storage warehouse? He managed to hide the body for 3 years like that. Every single day, he acted as if nothing was wrong and cut it up himself. He kept passing by the body of the deceased for 3 years. And in the end, he left the official's body in a public place and was arrested. But don't you think something is strange after hearing this story? That's right. Why? He left the can unattended for 3 years without anyone noticing. So why suddenly bring it to a public park where it would be seen? Actually, the reason for that seems to be his poor health. At the end of April 2009, back pain and health issues made working hard, and he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. He had retired. In other words, since he was going to retire, he couldn't just leave the metal drum at the company anymore. He took the metal drum home by taxi. After that, since he had debts and no income, he applied for welfare and had to move. He actually moved to an apartment next to the garbage area, where the 3rd metal drum was found. He was planning to store the metal drum at his new apartment as well, but there wasn't enough space in the apartment to keep 4 metal drums, so he had no choice but to move them somewhere else. His severe chronic back pain and lack of a car made it hard for him to travel far. Since he had no means to transport them, he reluctantly decided to move just one of the 4 metal drums to a nearby location. Then, in late July 2011, he placed 1 drum in a park and on the street. When the drum in the park was discovered, the case came to light. 2 years later, at the lay judge trial held in Osaka in 2013, he testified that when he returned home on the night of April 10, 2006, he found his eldest son dead in bed. A large hammer was at his feet, and his wife was found in the bathroom with cut wrists, leading him to think she had committed suicide with their eldest son. He denied killing them and said he left the bodies because he was away on a school trip. He stated that he thought he couldn't let his younger son find out about his mother's murder-suicide. He admitted to abandoning the bodies, but consistently claimed innocence regarding the murder charges. At that time, he explained to his younger son that the 2 had left, and the younger son was shocked, thinking he had been abandoned by his mother. But those 2. It's strange not to report finding the body right away, and then to go as far as dismembering it completely. The fact that he hid the deaths of the 2 can only be seen as involvement in their deaths, and it was determined that he was involved in their deaths. And as for the intent to kill, the place where the deaths occurred, since a large amount of the eldest son's blood was found in the apartment where they lived at the time. Regarding the murder of the eldest son, the intent to kill is recognized. But as for the wife, there is little evidence, so it cannot be recognized in her case. The eldest son was charged with murder, the wife with causing death by injury, and both received a 28-year prison sentence. He was unhappy with the verdict and later appealed to the Supreme Court. On October 15, 2013, the Supreme Court denied his appeal. A 28-year prison sentence was finalized. However, the motive and details of the crime remain unknown. According to his claim, he did not commit the murder. That would mean he dismembered his family's bodies and packed them into containers. We don't know why he would do such a thing. After disposing of the two bodies, he filed a missing persons report and dismembered his family's bodies. He continued living as usual afterward. Despite this, I still find his claims unreasonable. After that, he remained silent about the case, and as of 2022, he is probably still spending his days in a cold cell. Why did those two have to lose their lives? Something about this case still leaves a sense of unease. I sincerely pray for the souls of the two victims. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Perfect crimes. In Japan, it's sometimes said that the arrest rate for suspects is 99.9%. Commits a crime, and that crime comes to light. This reportedly represents just 25% of all crimes. So, the other 75% of crimes are perfect crimes. You could say that, but it also covers shoplifting and similar things. Since this number includes minor crimes, the perfect crime rate for serious offenses is lower. You could also say that in the late 1900s there was a man called the tragic husband. Strangely, all three women this man married died suddenly, yet he wasn't considered a tragic husband. The truth was, these were murders committed for insurance money. However, this case was never even suspected as a crime, and could have easily remained a perfect crime. But 5 years after the murders were committed, one day, the case took a sudden turn, resulting in the culprit's arrest. The key to solving it was a certain professor. If this professor hadn't been involved in the case, it would have fallen into the 75%. The culprit would be remembered as a tragic husband. The 75 Tory stock and insurance murder case led to an arrest on May 19, 1986. Chikara Kamiya would later be arrested in this case. Kamiya was... Welcome? This led to the arrest in connection with the case. This case quickly led to an arrest. This case involved a sudden arrest. This case was urgent. After the development, it moved on to the next stage in the evening, and then progressed further in the afternoon and evening. He was confirmed dead at the hospital at 11 a.m. and in the evening. He had come together with someone. Kamiya rushed to the hospital after a friend called to explain the situation. To find out his wife's cause of death, a judicial autopsy was done with Kamiya's consent. The autopsy performer later became a key figure in this prefecture. Mr. Yokichi Ono was then an associate professor at the University of the Ryukyu's School of Medicine. His wife was diagnosed with acute myocardial infarction, and the case was nearly closed as not suspicious. However, Mr. Ono discovered a small trace of congestion in part of the heart. He grew suspicious since the internal organs showed no pathological or obvious abnormalities that could explain sudden death. Mr. Ono kept his wife's heart and 30 cc of blood, notified the police, and conducted a toxicology test as a precaution. And as a result, this action ultimately led to the discovery of this case. However, toxicology tests cannot be conducted all at once. The testing method must be changed depending on each specific poison to determine whether that particular toxin is present in the blood. Must be used. In other words, it's a process that takes quite a bit of time. Meanwhile, around that time, the wife's friends were starting to feel suspicious about Kamiya. Actually, the friends had seen Kamiya giving his wife some kind of capsule to take. Considering this, after she died, the friends, they chose to inform the police, media, and newspapers about their uneasy feelings toward Kamiya's words and actions so far. Kamiya sent her a large number of gifts and proposed to her just 6 days after they met. He poisoned her by putting toxins into her organs. Kamo. At that time, Kamiya was always struggling with money, so this amount is considered abnormal. However, it was later revealed that he took out these insurance policies just 20 days before his wife passed away. This huge premium was only paid once, and there were other suspicious points as well. At his wife's funeral, no one related to Kamiya attended, and all the company names in the condolence register were found to be fake, created by Kamiya. Afterward, the insurance company withheld the payment. Despite her past hospital visits for a neurological disease, they withheld payment, citing a duty of disclosure violation because she didn't report it when signing the contract. In response, Kamiya distributed a memoir he wrote himself to the media, trying to gain public sympathy as a tragic husband, and filed a civil lawsuit demanding the insurance payout. At the Tokyo District Court's first trial, the judge ruled she hadn't violated disclosure duties, so Kamiya won. The insurance company appealed, and at the appellate trial, the person who did the judicial autopsy on his wife testified. It was Professor Ono. Professor Ono conducted tests for the presence of all kinds of poisons after the incident occurred. As a result, he stated that there was a possibility that her cause of death was due to poison. Kamiya withdrew the lawsuit in response. About 5 years have passed since his wife died. June 9, 1991. This case was about to take a shocking turn, and then what happened? Kamiya was arrested for a different bribery case. Actually, in 1980, he was found to have committed bribery at the company he retired from in 1990. During the investigation, it became possible this case was a murder for insurance money. On July 1st that year, the Metropolitan Police re-arrested Kamiya for suspected murder and fraud. During that time, Professor Ono, who performed the autopsy, continued a thorough investigation. As a result, he was able to identify the poison used in the crime. The substance used in this case was monkshood. To support this, a florist came forward claiming to have sold monkshood to Kamiya, and Kamiya had rented. 1 month, the apartment's water and electricity bills were unusually high. Following the landlord's testimony, police searched the house. As a result, aconite poison was detected in Kamiya's room. At that time, experimental equipment was also confiscated. And furthermore, a fisherman appeared who claimed to have sold Kamiya more than 1,000 grass puffers. Because of that, the police kept it at Ryukyu University. They decided to re-examine his wife's blood. Then, incredibly, pufferfish poison was detected in that blood. And Kamiya had both monkshood and pufferfish. It was confirmed he bought large quantities and borrowed money from consumer finance companies. Since his wife had originally been taking supplement capsules, there is suspicion that he mixed the poison into them and had her take it together. In response to this, Kamiya said that he bought monkshood for ornamental purposes, and the pufferfish was for starting a food company. Kanimazu. Kamiya went. 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 The district court sentenced Kamiya to life imprisonment. Kamiya will appeal. The Tokyo High Court also upheld the first trial's verdict in the second trial. The Supreme Court also rejected the appeal, and on February 21, 2000, Kamiya's life sentence was finalized. Even during the latter half of the trial, and after serving his sentence, he kept publishing books and claiming his innocence. And without ever admitting to the crime, in November 2012, Kamiya died of illness at the Osaka medical prison at the age of 73. He never admitted to the crime before his death. As for Kamiya, he was actually married 3 times, and all of his wives died suddenly. The first wife, a nurse, died of a heart attack at 38. At that time, there was no life insurance on this woman. The second wife was his boss at work, with whom he had a 10-year affair. He took out a 10 million yen insurance policy on her, naming Kamatani as the beneficiary. She died of acute heart failure. And then, he started dating his third wife, about a month after the second wife died, as I mentioned earlier. And just 4 months later, they got married. Why did things move so quickly? Did Kamiya come up with the idea of poisoning? And is that why he envisioned such a plan? Let's look at his book. It is believed that his mother had a significant influence on this background. His mother, after a complicated romantic relationship while he was in elementary school, she took her own life with sleeping pills. Probably because his mother died from taking pills, the idea that you can die from medication was always in the back of his mind. And as for the crucial knowledge about poisons, his first wife was a nurse. He also self-studied and gained knowledge, or so it appears. The first wife was likely an experiment. From the second wife on, he killed for insurance money. It could have easily become a perfect crime, as he denied being the perpetrator until the end. As for Kamiya, isn't it highly likely that he was guilty based on the evidence that was found? Lives were taken by Kamiya. I sincerely pray for the victims' souls. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. 1,200 years ago, Kobo Daishi Kukai's sacred sites were spread across Shikoku. The journey to visit all 88 temples, called Kechigan or Mangan, is believed to remove worldly desires and bring Kobo Daishi's blessings. People who undertake this pilgrimage are called Ohenro-san, and they seek health. They visit the 88 temples for reasons like prayers, self-discovery, or memorials for loved ones. And among them, there are those who have secrets they can't tell anyone. Even so, this time, someone is carrying an extraordinary circumstance. Let me introduce the person who became a pilgrim, or the culprit. The Mitsuki incident. On July 9, 2003, a man on the wanted list was arrested. The charges date back 12 years to 1991. An attempted murder took place on Osaka's streets in 1991. He fled immediately after. Although this man was later put on a wanted list, the police were unable to track him down, and the case remained unsolved. However, about 12 years after the incident, in 2003, finally, the police were able to locate the man's whereabouts, and the case was solved. What led to his arrest was a certain television program aired nationwide. Let's begin by examining the case details. On November 5, 1991, an attempted murder with a kitchen knife happened on a street in Nishinari Ward, Osaka City. It happened after a fight between co-workers. The police decided to face the police. The victim was taken by the police. He wore a black Sugagasa hat, a white beard, and was dressed all in white. He packed essentials like a sleeping bag and stove onto a handcart, and completed the 1,400-kilometer Shikoku 88 temple pilgrimage. In his 6 years as a pilgrim until age 80, he impressively completed the pilgrimage 28 times. While receiving hospitality like food and lodging from others, he would also spend his days camping outdoors and cooking for himself. He enjoyed chatting with the people he met along the way, composed haiku, handed out fukushu as thanks for the hospitality, and just kept on walking. He eventually became known as a legendary pilgrim. People were deeply moved by the way he lived. A photographer published a photo book of Mr. Kogetsu, and a television producer made a documentary program about him. The program was broadcast nationwide, teaching many people what it means to live. This program deeply moved many viewers. However, this would greatly change his life as a pilgrim. It was a police officer who happened to be watching the nationally broadcast program. Seeing Mitsuki-san on the screen, he thought the following: a fugitive wanted for attempted murder 12 years ago remains at large. Isn't that right? I'm sure you all already understand. But Mitsuki-san is the fugitive wanted for attempted murder I just mentioned. His name is Kojiro Tanaka. His appearance on a television show using his real name revealed his location. He was arrested by Osaka Prefectural Police on July 9, 2003 at age 80. The documentary program aired on June 27, which means that after the program was broadcast, he was arrested in about 2 weeks. In the subsequent investigation, he admitted to stabbing, but stated that he had no intention to kill. The defendant's lawyers said it was a pilgrimage for his late parents. They said forcing himself to hold the memorial showed he was reflecting on his crime. A suspended sentence and execution. It led to a suspended sentence. That's what I was told to say. You Takumi. Eat. It's called Yodai, attributed to a unique environment, separate from daily life. It means believers visiting religiously significant places or structures. Japan also has the Shikoku Henro pilgrimage. At first, there are many pilgrimage sites, such as Isemairi, Kumano mode, and Fuji mode. Nowadays, with the Henro boom, there are also Henro tours where you can travel by bus or taxi. This is recent. Originally, the Shikoku Henro was for people exiled from their hometowns. It was also known as a place of last resort for those in need, to heal wounds of the heart, to pray for the souls of the departed. It is said that people go there for many reasons, such as to reflect on their own lives once again. And it is said that many people who have committed sins or who have pasts they cannot tell anyone about, people with burdens too heavy to bear alone, come to Shikoku and travel to the 88 sacred sites seeking liberation from their suffering. And the local residents accept these people without asking anything, treating everyone equally. One of the unique features of the Shikoku pilgrimage is that the locals offer hospitality and support to the pilgrims without asking for their reasons. In this way, by living as a pilgrim in Shikoku, he was able to escape from the police. Renowned as a legendary grass pilgrim and for meeting many people, Mr. Kogetsu was also featured on television shows. The fact that he was a wanted criminal was widely reported by the media. Many people feel betrayed and angry after supporting and welcoming Mr. Kogetsu until now. However, some people in Shikoku also helped Mr. Kogetsu, and about roughly 1,300 people signed a petition demanding the original sentence. The male victim in this case also said that while he cannot forgive the incident, he asked for the sentence to be reduced. Correct. Why? The man who avoided his crime for 12 years. Do people around him try to save him? One reason for this is the unique nature of the Shikoku pilgrimage. He committed attempted murder and then escaped. Crimes that can never be forgiven. However, on the other hand, it is also true that for 6 years, as a fugitive, he continued the pilgrimage and sometimes composed haiku, deeply moving many people. Was he just running from the law, or did he seek atonement? What was he looking for on the pilgrimage? The real reason is unclear. Still, people in our prefecture, including victims, interacted with him. Many people tried to forgive him. He is a mysterious case. I think many people have a dark side in their hearts. And then, at some point, triggered by something, they take a step in the wrong direction. As a result, they make mistakes. I think this is something that can happen to anyone. He said he undertook the Shikoku pilgrimage to reflect on his crime through ascetic practices. The fact remains that he was on the run, but even then, he continued to atone for his crime, and that was conveyed to many people. That's why, although the victim in this case couldn't forgive him, they asked for his sentence to be reduced. If I were to describe him objectively in one word, he committed attempted murder and lived as a fugitive for a long time. How did you all feel about this wanted criminal case? If you don't mind, please share your thoughts in the comments section. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. (2022) Osaka City, Saitama. An unidentified man's body was found at the burned site. We are seeking information to help arrest the perpetrator. Unfortunately, nothing was found, and a rumor about the perpetrator began to spread. We received news of a sudden development. The suspect in this case has been arrested. around 9:50 a.m. on May 14, 2022 in Osaka City, Saitama Prefecture. He walked past Nagayoshi Interior, an interior design firm in Kaminakama Castle. A 47-year-old female passerby reported that smoke was coming from the building. The fire department rushed to the scene and desperately tried to put out the fire. But the prefab building used as an office and workshop was completely destroyed. Later, the body of an unidentified man was found in the burned remains. Police are quickly trying to identify the man and are treating the case as a possible crime. They've begun investigating, considering both accident and crime. On May 16th, 2 days later, the police conducted another on-site investigation. But everything had been completely burned. Part of the prefab's roof collapsed, revealing the fire's intensity. The single-story prefab measured about 10 by 13 meters, or roughly 40 tsubo. Its north side was a workshop, while the south side contained offices. That's right, the man's body was found on the south side of the prefab. Because the door was locked, and based on these circumstances, it seems the suspect intended to kill. Police ruled the case arson and murder, forming an 80-person investigation team at Osaka Police Station. 2 days later, on May 18th, the investigation headquarters received the DNA test results. The body was identified as the company's president. It was revealed that the body was Akira Nagayoshi, who was 43 years old at the time. Furthermore, according to interviews with investigators, on the north side of the prefab building, it was also revealed that bloodstains believed to belong to Mr. Nagayoshi were found in the workshop. According to the autopsy, the skin was burned and blistered, but there were no signs of being tied up or any bruises that could be confirmed. However, there were multiple fractures on the upper body. From that, it was considered highly likely that the culprit struck the victim multiple times with a hard object. The autopsy found Mr. Nagayoshi died from hemorrhage. His airway was burned and carbon monoxide was detected in his blood. It was also confirmed that soot remained inside his body. In other words, this means that Mr. Nagayoshi was set on fire while he was still alive. Taking all this into account, the culprit struck Mr. Nagayoshi multiple times with a hard object, then set him on fire and left the scene. It was highly suspected. And then, on the following day, the 19th, after further questioning, Mr. Nagayoshi's movements before and after the incident were clarified, and both a wallet and a cell phone believed to be his were found. On the night before the incident, Mr. Nagayoshi was working with several people on interior construction outside the prefecture, and it was confirmed that the seal belonged to Mr. Nagayoshi. However, there was trouble at the place where Mr. Nagayoshi was found dead. Chikara, chikara, shishu, shishu. Shishu, 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 shishu. Shishu. I thought I might be able to figure out what's going on, so I checked. But because of the fire, everything was burned and charred, and on top of that, it got soaked with water. So it's hard to tell if it can even be analyzed. The police are investigating Mr. Nagayoshi's relationships and quickly working to find the fire's cause and location. A week after setting up the investigation headquarters, on May 24th, the police started questioning people around the scene. They gathered drive recorder footage and searched for clues to arrest the culprit, but found nothing. As for the on-site investigation, the condition of the fire required a lot of time, and hardly any traces were found. The police found that cash was left in Mr. Nagayoshi's wallet. They proceeded with the investigation, believing that this case was not a robbery, but rather strongly suspected to be a case of personal grudge. According to those around him, Mr. Nagayoshi, yes, he was an independent contractor, assisting colleagues and getting their help in return. That's right, he worked at a metal factory near Nagayoshi Interior. He worked hard and got along well with colleagues. Some co-workers said they had seen him working outside the prefab building, processing wood. Furthermore, other people in the same line of work said that he was found left inside the workshop's key box. and it was found that the workshop shutter could be opened and closed manually. On the day of the incident, when the firefighters entered, the workshop shutter was down and the door was locked. So it is believed that the perpetrator set the fire after Mr. Nagayoshi was unable to move. Then the perpetrator lowered the workshop shutter and locked the entrance. Furthermore, the perpetrator put the key in the workshop's key box and then most likely left the scene. After that, the police deployed a total of 21 investigators. They deployed 47 officers and interviewed 360 people from 207 households near the scene. In addition, the investigation focused on analyzing materials collected from the scene and interviewing related experts. However, after these reports, information about this case gradually stopped being covered. Soon after this incident occurred, a certain rumor about the perpetrator began to spread. The rumor was that the perpetrator of this case might be Southeast Asian. There are two reasons given for this. The first reason is the change in the population of Osaka City. Saitama Prefecture has many foreign residents, including Osaka City, where the incident occurred. Reports say the number of people from Southeast Asia and South America has risen in the past decade. Saitama Prefecture, facing population decline and labor shortages, has worked to accept more foreigners. This is because they are actively working on it. And in Osaka City, there is an organization that supports foreign workers. Among those industries, there are also jobs related to construction. The country accepting them is Vietnam, and this leads to the second reason. The second reason is the reviews of Nagayoshi interior. These are reviews found on the internet, and there are two reviews for Nagayoshi interior. One of them is a low rating, and when I looked into the person who gave this rating, it was a Vietnamese name. If the person who gave this low rating was someone who had been involved with Nagayoshi interior, then I suspect that there might have been some kind of trouble. However, this theory is just based on rumors with no supporting evidence. About 6 months after the incident, on November 21, as I was writing the manuscript about who the culprit might be, although it may be in the past for you, for me, there was just now a sudden development in this case, according to the news. Amazingly, the suspect in this case has been arrested. Who was arrested? It was an interior construction worker in Ogawa Town. Suspects Wataru Oki, 37, and Toshiki Onishi, 31, an unemployed former interior worker from Koshigaya City, repeatedly struck Mr. Nagayoshi with a blunt object. They attacked him, set the place on fire, and are suspected of killing him. The investigation headquarters said the victim and both suspects were craftsmen in interior construction. It seems that Mr. Nagayoshi had subcontracted the jobs he got to the two of them. They said unpaid wages and being shortchanged led them to commit the crime. The biggest factor that led to the suspect's arrest was the security camera footage and the examination of their cell phone. Both suspects were two of the people who had been working together on the day the incident occurred. On May 14th at 4 a.m., they worked outside the prefecture. They returned together from the site, each driving their own car back to the prefab building. After that, they parted ways. And then, at around 9:50 a.m. on the same day, a report came in. It seems Nagayoshi-san was alive shortly before, as security cameras recorded footage during that time. The footage showed Onishi being in the car, driven by Oki, the suspect. At the time, the two of them said they had only returned to pick up some materials. However, part of their criminal plan was revealed through their subsequent cell phone communications, leading to their arrest. After a brutal assault, they set her on fire alive, killing her. People say Ms. Nagayoshi had no issues or conflicts that could cause resentment. However, the two were there may have been some resentment. Something happened recently. I wanted to bring it up as an unsolved case and hope to get even a single piece of information. With the arrest of the suspect in this case, it's a sudden development, and in terms of progress, it's something to be glad about. But the fact remains that the precious life that was taken will not return. Mr. Nagayoshi's mother spoke as follows. When I think that my son could have lived longer, the sadness makes my heart feel like it's going to break. I think this feeling will last forever. I can never forgive the perpetrator, but I hope that through the investigation and trial, the truth will be revealed. Lastly, I offer my heartfelt condolences for the loss of Nagayoshi Ryo in this incident. Well then, that's all for today. Thank you for watching.